Hello, and thank you for joining me on another episode of Mental Health, the New Wealth. I am so excited for today's episode. I have a special guest here, and she has been a part of my life for so long. I couldn't even imagine my life without her. This is Portia Angel. How are you doing today, my love?
I am doing well. I am so happy to be here. Thank you, sister, for having me.
Absolutely. This episode is very, very important and it's pivotal in everyone's life because at some point or another, you have gone through the transition of finding out what spiritual practices, religion, and things of that nature mean to you. And so this episode will basically cover your foundation in spiritual rearing and how you have cultivated and developed that as you have grown older and what that has done or what correlation that has been for your mental health and your mental stability. So thank you so much, sis, for being able to join me for today's episode. So let's get a little background. Who is Portia Angel? Who is P Dub?
I'm P Dub to you. Nah. I am a former teacher, music artist, and now health advocate, clinical researcher, and spiritual life coach, you will. I'm going through a metamorphosis of sorts.
Transition,
even now as we speak, but that's just a brief synopsis on the journey thus far. And I am here just learning to be.
Thank you so much. Thank you for being present and here with me at this moment because this is very, very important. We both collectively and individually have gone through so many things spiritually, mentally, in general in our lives. And we have grown so much in so many ways. And I'm so excited that we have been reunited in this place.
Yes.
At this moment in our lives because we need each other.
Mm-hmm.
Our journey began, I want to say, as early as 8 years old, I believe I was. To give some preface to this episode, let's talk about some foundation. So I met Portia at church, okay, in Oakland, California. We Bay Area natives out here.
Yeah,
So I met her at church. And so I remember at that time, we gained our foundation. A lot of the things that we understood to be true about spiritual practices, religion, who we should be as people in general, we were learning and building from there. Wouldn't you say, Portia?
Absolutely. That was where I learned all the scriptures in the Bible, all the 66 books, and how to pray, and just the things of church and the things of God, as best as I understood, as best as we understood as kids. So there was a lot of good foundation there. And it was also great because at the time, the church that we were in was non denominational. So there was so much freedom. I remember even in our young age going, I used to love going. I mean, of course, because we got to see our friends and stuff, but I used to love going. And I remember observing the adults that were there and how free they were getting in their own lives. They would come together, for community and fellowship, and people off the streets, they getting freed and delivered from drug addiction and prostitution. And it was never, you need to come in a pretentious way and dress up anything and be quiet. It was like, nah, come as you are and just be free to praise God together and get a revelation for yourself. And so that's what I remember in our formative years being there.
And to speak to the fact of the non denominational, we were thriving, we were growing. There was no rules other than to go off of the word of God. Seek the word, understand and dissecting the word. And that's why I remember it being so important for us to have Bible study, for us to get in the word, for us to understand that, because in that non-denominational church, that was our sword. That was our tool. That's what we learned, and how we learned to maneuver and combat in this spiritual world. We had conversations. We can ask questions.
Mm-hmm.
If there was any discrepancy, it wasn't about ego. We just referred to the word. And I really love that. Everyone was growing and thriving, and you were actually able to see the fruits of God in people's lives. And then as time transitioned, the church transformed from non-denominational to Kojic, and then there was that experience. And to me, we were told, like, it's not going to be that much of a change, not that much of a transition. It's just going to be little things here and there. But what I experienced was the level of rules and different doctrine that came with that sect of religion kind of strangled or cut off the freedom and the growth that we experienced, or we grew to know in those early years as growing up in the church. What do you feel about that?
Yeah, I can definitely say in my personal journey, and I think this is synonymous with any facet of life, honestly, because once you go through so many grade levels in school, you can't stay at the same elementary school when it's time for you to go to junior high school and so forth. So at some point, it was like, okay, I feel like I'm being pushed into more when it comes to understanding God and the Bible. And so I ended up leaving. But over time, my family, different parts of my family, they were still at this particular church. And it's interesting that you can go today, and this was probably 20 years ago, and you're still going to hear the same thing in terms of knowledge and revelation. You're not going to hear any new revelation. You're not going to experience or see really any more growth than you did 20 years ago. That's what I'm getting at. And it was like when the denomination transition happened over time, you could just look back and see where the growth spiritually, where the growth mentally stopped. Because it was like there's no more life coming out of this. It was more so, this is the doctrine of interpretation of what we believe, and you're not finna go outside of that, whether it's right or wrong, whether it's spirit led or not. And so that became what superseded the move of the spirit. It was now the program of the church, the program of this denomination. And that became an overarching experience, I feel like, and not just that church, but in so many others that I experienced thereafter.
I'm gonna move because I can edit this out.
Okay.
Yes, and I can agree with you, because there was a certain level of growth and freedom experience with that radicalness. We were radical Christians. I remember that we went out and we did witnessing on the street and different things like that, and really got people to transition their lives. And when the new denomination came, it was just all really different. So I really do agree with how you saw that as well. And like you said, that was a gem, for us. But as it transitioned, and then going to other churches as we got older and separated and moved around and things of that nature, I had not found a church that was as radical. There was one in Fremont that I was going to for a while. But it seems like as you start to go and really see what is going on, and you just are really seeking God, and starting to, really get into different sectors of what people believe, it's just not like God is not in it. That is kind of what is most important for us to speak about today, because we all have a connection with spirit. We all can interpret what we feel that spirit is. But when you are growing up in an era that tells you that, God is this, spirit is that. You are only to experience it in this way. You are only to interpret it in this way. Anything that you feel that is God led, that you feel personally, it needs to be checked up, put in alignment with what the doctrine says. And so as you grow older in that, it kind of causes conflict within your spirit. And that is what I can say that I experience also over time, just transitioning from a non-denominational church and then going through the experiences of finding spiritualism and what spirit is in my life at this time.
So to speak to what you just said, sis, when you're going through the transitions of life and even those spiritual transitions, and like you said, the conflict of this is what I feel led to do in my spirit, but it's not necessarily aligning with the church that I'm in. And then that's the battle. What supersedes what? Because now it's what I've been told, what I've been limited to do in this environment versus what I feel God, because I do have a relationship with God for myself. It's conflicting with what I feel God is telling me or leading me to do. And for me, I know the scariest thing was feeling like I was being pulled out and called out of church altogether. So then what do you do when that happens? Because everything you've been taught, everything that you've known, and this is how it ties so heavily into mental health, because so much of our rearing, our identity, it's been church-based. It's not even been so much spirit-based, not so much even God-based. It's been church-based. So who are you outside of this organization? And how much do you really know about yourself? And how strong are you to stand by yourself when this organization is now preaching and proclaiming to you not the gospel of Christ, not the gospel of peace, but now the gospel of hell? Wow. Because that's where you going if you're not here. That's where you going if you asking questions. Oh, so that's a spirit that's wanting to deny the word. Who said I was denying anything? Because I'm asking for a question. I'm asking for clarity, or even experiencing, like you said, God in a way that was outside of the four walls in different avenues. It was like, wait a minute, I'm getting messages on the radio. I'm seeing messages on billboards. I'm seeing messages that were specific to my situation on cards. I'm seeing messages from, you name it. And we limit our spiritual experience and relationship with God because of the infrastructure that is church that we have been indoctrinated by. And for me recently, it's just been the realization I have been programmed, and it is a mental and emotional struggle that has deeply affected my mental health and sense of self, because it's a constant battle to be free from those types of religious regimes that have inflicted so much upon your psyche to the point of going to hell. That's damage beyond damaging. To break free from that, it's more than a notion.
Yeah, absolutely. And the fear,
Yeah.
And you would have to really think about it. If you think about what God is, and just wrapping it all up into God is love. And so to be love, but to damn you to hell for something that you do or you feel that, you should do based off of the unctioning of God. And if that's not lined up to a doctrine, then you're going to hell. And that's just not of love. Just the turmoil that you feel, the conflict, the stress that you endure mentally from that. And that's the telltale sign too, that I would say that whether something is from God or not.
Right.
God is not the author of confusion.
Right.
So if you're confused, if you're worried, if you're conflicted, like you really are going back and forth in your mind, body, and spirit regarding a certain thing, then the answer is just absolutely no.
Yeah.
You're so scared to do or say anything other than what you were taught, even though that this might now be your new truth,
Right.
your new discovery, your new personal revelation on how you want to move forward and live your life.
Right.
But because of how you were raised and what you were told and kind of, dogmatically put into you, you're scared to even live your truth. And so that's really deep, because you will have a spiritual death so that you can have a spiritual awakening. And we just talked about that on 6 Saturdays. For those of you guys who don't know, every first and fourth Saturday, we have 6 Saturday Speaking in Color Saturdays on Clubhouse. And we were talking about spiritual death. And so, in that spiritual death, you are stripped of everything. Like everything is taken away so that you can unlearn all the things that you have been programmed to learn, all the things that no longer serve you, all the things that are no longer in alignment with who you are becoming and who you are getting ready to be in the future. And so when you go through this, it's hard because a lot of times while you're dying to self, old ideas, concepts, thought processes, on a regular basis, you are then dying in forms of certain relationships, certain connections you no longer have. Because when you leave a certain doctrine, the people that praised you, honored you, were partners or peers in this said doctrine are no longer your confidants, no longer your friends. You have discovered that a lot of those relationships were connected to a quote unquote spiritual practice that no longer serves you. And so you are by yourself in a lot of, in a lot of ways.
And being by yourself, going through that isolation, that can be deafening because I just, I don't feel, going back to a biblical perspective, it is not good that men should be alone. And I really do feel that that is true in the sense that when you are isolated too much, a lot can go haywire, at least upstairs. I'm not saying that you don't have seasons of solitude where it's necessary for you to gather some things, but then I think isolation outside of a certain time frame, it can be unhealthy.
Yeah.
It can, make you feel, I know for me in my experience, it made me feel very distrusting of people. It made me feel very distrusting of certain Christian or religious church groups. The last time that I was officially in one was technically the end of 2013. And the way that happened, I knew it was God because there was a situation that actually it had been several situations. We won't even talk about the drama and the scandals and the foolery that tends to happen in these environments. And it's not all, but I'm not going to sit here and say that it does not happen. But nonetheless, there was a situation that went down, and I remember leaving the stage because I was one of the praise and worship leaders, leaving the stage, and I knew that that was going to be the last time that I went into that church.
Oh, wow.
And oddly enough, that same week I had got a teaching assignment. I was working for Kaplan as an SAT instructor, and they scheduled me Sundays at 11 o'clock in the morning and Wednesday nights. Both days where church services were happening. And I was like, what? That I was like, okay, God, so what are you saying right now? And then when I transitioned from teaching into full-time artistry and doing music, I was called overseas to be on cruise ships. So there was no going to church. You are out to sea every day. and you are in different countries, you can't run to nobody else to pray for you. You can't, go to the pastor at a service and ask that person to speak a word into your life. And so I feel that one of the benefits of being in that alone process, for those who may be there right now, is that your relationship, on a positive note, your relationship and connection with God, with the divine, it goes to another level exponentially. It has to, because you're no longer dependent on somebody else to feed you the word. You're no longer waiting on someone else to do the work for you, to pray for you. And I knew when I was going into that environment musically, I was just like, I have to strengthen my spiritual gifts. I have to strengthen my spiritual ear. I need to be able to prophesy to myself and other people around me if need be, because I still knew that I was called to be a light wherever I went. And that's where I also experienced God outside of churchy ways, even ways that the church demonized, and that also played heavily on my mental health. Like I said, how do you get a message in a sermon from some alleged secular music that's playing on the radio? But I'm going to tell you something. When it happened to me, I knew that that was God using, that God can use anything. That's the biggest thing that I've learned. We have limited God so much because of what we've been taught. And we're not able to see the fullness manifestation of God in our lives because of that. And unfortunately, when you are leaving those environments, you're going to run into that matrix wall. The agents of the matrix are going to come out gunning for you because they're programmed to.
Yeah.
And you really have to build up the knowledge that you have learned, the relationship that you have strengthened with God, to know I'm not crazy, number one. I know God, number two.
Absolutely.
Number three, I can't go backward, because going backward is deception.
Yes.
That's telling me that I did not see, I did not know, I did not experience what I did outside of your institution. And it's not the devil. I'm not sitting over here doing seances,
And let's go into that. And I'm gonna take you back just a pinch, because it was just very profound that you said that. And one can say that we learned the doctrine of depending on others through, Christianity and slavery. But just this notion that you cannot do it on your own. You can't do it by yourself or by your own hand or by your own ability. But I know to be true that with God's help, all things are possible.
Right.
And you don't need to seek someone else to get the revelations, the healing, the messages, the quote unquote word that you need. And so a lot of us, if a lot of us are going out, jumping from church to church because it's not feeling right. You're going out of your way. You're listening to everyone and anyone. You're online looking for certain things. You're getting readings from people that you don't know. You're, just doing a lot of things that are putting you in harm's way spiritually, because you do not believe that the God that is within you is enough to get you what you need. And that is just so profound to me. So it was very important that you said that, because like the meme I have been hearing lately, no one is coming for you.
Right.
No one's coming. No one's going to save you. No one's going to rescue you. It's you.
Right.
It's you. And it's your message. It's what you receive. And if you cleanse out and clean out and get quiet enough, you can get the message that anyone else can get and tell to you. And that's what's most important to understand, that you don't have to go outside of self to receive what source has for you, because you indeed are a part of source.
Right.
Hello? Oh, shit.
I can hear you now.
Okay. So you talked about before your experience with your exodus with religion and going into, spirituality. And I know that that's a kind of trendy word now. Everybody is, spiritual, and everybody is woke and things of that nature. But it's like, it's a real thing. You know what I mean? And it's very important to have your own connection so that you can fluidly move and know what to do and not to do in different arenas in every part of your life. So I know for me, I started having an issue with certain churchy things or churchy people. And then for me, I started having a conflict or just this tug in my spirit in closing things out in Jesus' name. And so, in Christianity, honey, you can't say Jesus. It's like,
it's a problem.
Right. The devil is on your neck. Like, you can't say Jesus. What? Like, Jesus? Like, you're not closing stuff out in Jesus. And so I was just like, what's going on? Because I was having a conflict with that. But in my spirit, it wasn't having a conflict with Jesus Christ in the example that he showed us, because
Right.
in those fasts and those examples, I still am a Christian.
Right.
I am a follower of Christ and his doctrines and what he practiced.
Right.
But how it was interpreted and taught, it was just like this thing that if you don't do certain things in Jesus' name or whatever, that you're going to hell, that is not of God. And so that conflict alone let me know that that was something that I needed to kind of get away from, not negate, what Jesus has done, in our lives and the example that he set, but just learn for myself. And so that is when I start to realize and understand and started to unlearn, to relearn what I believe, spiritualism is and how it looks in my life, and speaking more so to ancestors and celestial beings and archangels and things of that nature, just the spiritual realm as a whole. So when did you discover, or what were the things that started to happen with you that you discovered that you were really going through this exodus?
Yeah, wow. Well, like I said earlier, being pulled out when it came to my careers, that was outside of my control. I know emotionally I had gone through some stuff at the church that I was at that was just like, no, I'm not coming back here. But then even after that, because I still really didn't know what was happening, and it didn't really make any sense to me, because it was just like, well, I know from what I've always known, you go to church and never forsake the assembly of the brethren. That's a scripture people love to throw around, not even understanding what that truly means. So you don't not go to church. So for a long time, when I could catch the internet online, church online rather, I would watch different sermons on the sea. But then I realized that I was on a spiritual journey kind of after the fact, because my cat died. And that was crushing. I was not expecting it to be what it was. And because I was trying to understand that transition for her, and I was seeking and searching, trying to get answers from a spiritual perspective about, where do animals go when they die? Is there a way to communicate? Because the way that she passed was very traumatic. And I wanted to be able to just say my piece, with her. And that, I think, was the can of worms that just opened. It was like one question led to another, and then it also brought answers that begat other questions.
Okay.
And so learning about the spirit realm just by way of her passing, learning about near-death experiences and what people are seeing regardless of their religious creed in those experiences, all being very, very alike. And then that opened up the question of, not even the question, the realization of different realms, where we are versus what the spirit realm is like. And it's not just the thing that we've been taught about, oh, you're gonna go to heaven, like what exactly is this realm that is existing, kind of like an overlay where we are right now. And it just became like going down the rabbit hole. And it was very exciting, because it's like, whoa, I never knew this, or I never imagined that. So that's when I realized it was probably like a good year to 2 years after my last church experience, when I was still out on the sea performing, that I realized, like, wow, I'm not in the same place. And I don't know that what I have experienced at this point aligns or would align with those environments. Not that I hated them, but I felt that they hated me. And that also weighed heavily on my mental health, because it was just like, I ain't done nothing wrong to nobody. I can't apologize or lie or take back where God has led me and the testimony I have with all of the different things I've now experienced. But I know that I don't have the freedom to go and share that in these churches, because they're going to demonize me and say that's not of God. And it's like, lady, sir, I ain't been around nobody but God. I wasn't pulled and indoctrinated by some cult.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Didn't nobody convert me or sign me up to be a part of some crazy group that was out there. It was none of that. All I was doing was praying to God, And so anyway, that's how I realized that this is definitely unexpected, not what I would have signed up for, but I'm so grateful because it has elevated my awareness of God in general more than I ever experienced. And I had a relationship with God in church, but this was like going from high school math in ninth grade to upper divisional physics in college, exponential growth. It was off the chain. And when you start understanding things on a higher plane, you're no longer on this lower level of understanding. It can be very conflicting for people who are still there. And I'm not going to demonize where people's understanding is spiritually, because I know how it feels to be demonized for where I am.
Right.
But I will say it's so important to stand boldly, even in the face of anxiety and fear and uncertainty. You know within your spirit that you're supposed to move forward. You may be scared, but do it anyway.
Yes.
Keep pushing forward anyway. If you feel like you're alone, don't go back. Keep going and being with where you are anyway. Because what I'm learning is the more that we follow that trajectory, the right people and the right circles, should we be called back to community, is going to align with where God is leading us.
Absolutely. I couldn't have said it better myself. And let's let it be understood that we are the church. I remember, like, when you first go to a church, it's like stand up so everyone can know who you are. Everyone comes over and they love on you and give you a hug and they give you information about the church. And it's like that for a couple of more Sundays until you start to see the real nuances of the church, like see what's going on with the people in the church. And we are the church. It's important to make sure that you have a singular and collective relationship with God for yourself. So when the church does what the church does, it don't mess you up in your walk and what you're doing, because then you will see what's going on. You will see flaws. You will see people's different things being exposed that you might not agree with. And so a lot of times in the scenarios, if you are connected to the church or the people in the church, you tend to fall away from the spiritual aspect of it, because your whole spiritual being was wrapped up in the people of the church and not actually the connection that you have with God in your everyday life. And so it's just important to understand that, yes, you are to commune with one another, but if two or more are gathered in assembly, we are the church.
Right.
You don't have to go seeking for, this conglomerate or this building or this thing. And I got to make sure I pay my tithes and offerings. When you see someone on the street,
okay,
and they are homeless and they asking you for something to eat, if you want to do something kind for somebody just because that's what you want to do, that is tithes and offerings to the ministry.
right.
So don't get it confused, because as it stands, church are nonprofit organizations, the actual building, the brick and mortar of what churches are. And so, yes, their objective is to get you there, because without you being in attendance, they would not have a business.
Right.
And so understand that regardless if you have the brick and mortar or not, even if you decide to meet with like-minded people at the park, you guys are on a Zoom call or whatever, in that place at that time, you guys are then the church. And so let's talk about too. We talked about different ways that we have been impacted spiritually, mentally, regarding the church and what that has done to us. At on Mental Health, the New Wealth, we are always going to be solutionary. We are always going to make sure that you have something to stick to so that you can move forward in the best levels of love and light. So let's talk about some solutions that we can do or we can put in practice so that we can be spiritually aligned and maintain great spiritual hygiene.
I was about to say awesome. Pause.
That's fine.
So I really want to touch on really quickly, for those who feel like you have been going through a mental health crisis because of whatever doctrine you have been attempting to come out of, anything that is oppressive. First of all, I just want to touch briefly on that. If you are in a situation that is vexing your spirit, that is vexing your mind and your soul, people are telling you that you're going to hell. People are telling you what you can and cannot do. You have to be there 7 days a week or whenever the church doors open. You need to understand what is toxic religion and Christianity and churchianity versus what is God and spirit led, what is loving and what is truth and what is freedom. Because God has given us all free will. And if anything or anyone supersedes that free will, understand that it's not God. It's not God. So let's just be clear about the understanding of where you are and who you may be tied up with. I pray that that's not the case. But if you're listening and it is the case, just understand that there's something that's not healthy about that. And if you felt that in your spirit, it's time to seek counsel and make plans to step outside of that environment for your own well-being. Now, the other thing, going back to what you said, sis, earlier, I want to touch on this because what I have heard, it is a church slogan when you were talking about seeing the flaws of the people in the church. The comeback that I often hear is, well, the church is full of imperfect people. That's why they're there. And then there's also with that in tandem, the gospel of what I'm going to call toxic positivity and forgiveness. So we just gonna love you or love them with the love of Christ and just forgive. And I'm not saying that forgiveness isn't necessary, but what I'm saying is a lot of times churches will hide behind that as a facade to continue dysfunction. So you can continue your narcissistic, gossipy, manipulative ways in the name of the Lord, and we just supposed to forgive and let you keep doing that. No. Right. So when that is something that you're experiencing, also understand it's an environment that you may need to take steps to exit out of. So if you are dealing with anything that has been toxic from a spiritual and or religious perspective, whether it's church or not, I personally have found a lot of healing and solace within the 12-step recovery meeting groups, because a lot of times people will think, oh, well, 12-step is only for people who are dealing with alcohol abuse and addictions. But to be clear, any type of pattern in your life that is unhealthy, that has been detrimental to your mental health and your overall stability and growth and well-being, is addiction.
Yeah.
So for me right now, I'm in the process of doing the 12-step recovery program around religious trauma and church addiction, because that has created a false sense of identity that I'm now having to shed myself of, going back to the concept of spiritual death, to really find myself again in the freedom that I was born with. So I highly recommend looking into those types of meetings, because it's a safe space to convey what's going on for you. You're given the tools to really heal. You're around people who understand. The biggest thing for me has been no judgment. I also, as a solution, recommend, and you want to pray about it and vet the different groups that you find, but meetup.com is an excellent resource.
I love Meetup.
You can find groups for pretty much anything. And I did a search on there recently and found an amazing group that catered specifically to people who have had weird spiritual experiences that are unchurched. And where do you go? Finding community, especially when you feel like you're isolated, is very important at a certain point, so that you can feel that support that you need in a non-judgmental way, but also people who can contribute into your life in a safe environment, in a safe space.
Absolutely. And that was really a jewel, because I do know that the breakdown that they use in 12-step therapy is very supportive in looking at every part of the transition that you will experience, and going into each part and dissecting that. And so you're able to kind of uncover, unturn, sift through every part of the process, and then ultimately get the healing that you need. We also said that it was important for you to find someone on your journey that can be your accountability partner, and not in the way of making sure that you do a certain thing, but that you are continuously seeking your healing. You're not reverting or going back on the things that you said that you were going to move forward in, that you have someone that is safe that you can talk to, because a lot of times we don't have people in our lives in that way. The majority of the people that we're around for the majority of the time are our immediate family. And sometimes our immediate family can be the catalyst or some of the triggers to what is going on with us at that time. So you can't really have the people or the trigger being the support as well. So finding those who are in the same space that you are in, and you guys are collectively seeking for growth and healing. Also therapy. There are free therapy out there. I know Am Better and different facilities have therapy that you can utilize to get some healing. But I must say that right now, therapy is very, very crowded. A lot of people are still doing virtual therapy because we aren't fully back in person as of yet. But if you are able to find a virtual therapist that you resonate with, that is free or that is paid but affordable, definitely take that up as something that you can also do and couple together with group therapy, group accountability, things of that nature. And definitely, I would say when dealing with this, there is no solution. Let's be clear. There is no solution, because as you go through it, you're going to experience different levels that need to be healed. And so with each level, there needs to be a different form of healing. So the work will never be done, as I have said before, but the best thing to do is to get quiet, to cleanse your mind, do spiritual practices that cleanse your chakra and your mind of certain things, your heart of certain things, and forgive. And really just seek within. Anything that you need is within. And I just want to make sure to stress that. And one would be, it's just me. I be sitting here, I don't hear nothing. I don't, what you mean? Like, how am I supposed to go within? Quiet your mind. I know me, when I don't like to deal with stuff or want to deal with things, I get busy. I overwork. I do things that are unnecessary. And in my healing process, I learned that I pick up projects, whether it be people, whether it be habits, just things to keep my mind off of what I need to be doing for myself. And so get still, get quiet. It is uncomfortable, but once you are able to do that, then you will start hearing that still small voice. And the funny part about that is, if you don't pay attention to it, if you don't listen to it, if you don't give it the confidence that is garnered, then it's weak. So your actual voice, or the things that are outside stimuluses for you, are strong. They're stronger than that little still small voice. But when you start to feed it and nourish it and listen to it and trust in it and believe in the messages that you are feeling deep down within, then that voice will become louder to you. You will understand how that voice speaks to you, whether it's through music, whether it is through nature, whether it is through other people. Spirit can speak to you in any kind of way, but it's resonant to what you understand. So if you're a music lover, it might speak to you through music. If you love to dance, it might speak to you through dance or something that you see. So when you tap in with yourself, you're able to grasp more of when spirit is speaking to you. And just trust yourself. You don't have to seek outside of yourself. When you pray, praying is putting your message out to the divine. Meditation is listening to the message that is being given back to you in response. So just make sure you do these things. I'm glad that you were able to join me again today, my sister. Yes. I love you so much. We will definitely have you on again. This was very powerful and such a much needed conversation. If there are any other questions or topics that you have, you guys, regarding spiritualism and the correlation with mental health and wellness, definitely leave me some comments. This topic is so vast and we only touched the tip of the iceberg today. But as you are doing your work, always remember that your mental health is the new wealth.